This lab is called the reaction between iron and copper 2 chloride. The purpose of this lab is to determine the ratio between iron used and copper produced in the reaction between iron and copper 2 chloride. The balanced chemical reaction equation reads 1 Fe plus 1 CuCl2 produces 1 Cu plus 1 FeCl2. For your hypothesis, I want you to write, I predict that the reaction will produce blank moles of copper and that the ratio between iron and copper will be blank to blank. You're going to start with about 3 to 4 grams of copper 2 chloride. I want you to fill in those blanks in your hypothesis with numbers. Next will come your procedure. And then after your procedure, you're going to tape in the small piece of paper that says calculations and summary notes. Beneath that, you're going to write in your data table. Your data table has a spot for the mass of your empty beaker number 1, the mass of the copper 2 chloride, the mass of the nails before, the mass of the nails after, and the mass of beaker number 1 with copper. After that will come your observations. In the back of your lab notebook, I want you to put in the calculations references sheet that we will use for this lab and for several future labs this year. So step 1 of the procedure says to label a beaker with your names and label it beaker 1. So here's my clean dry beaker. This is beaker 1 and I am Nandor. Okay, mass it, record mass in data table. So the mass of the empty beaker is 114.33 grams. So it's 114.33 grams. Now it says to mass 3 to 4 grams of copper 2 chloride into the beaker. And a little bit more. So we have 3.61 grams of copper 2 chloride. So 3.61 grams of copper 2 chloride. Step 3 says add 50 milliliters of distilled water. And I'm going to go ahead and rinse my scrupula at the same time. And stir to dissolve. Okay, step 4 says mass 2 nails together. So I have 2 nails. Their mass is 5.31 grams. So the mass of the nails before is 5.31 grams. And then step 5 says to add the nails to the solution. And then let beaker sit on lab bench for at least 30 minutes. Make observations. So I'm going to slide that up there. And I'm not actually going to let it sit for 30 minutes. I will take a couple of pictures over the course of 30 minutes so that you can see how the reaction progresses, and then we'll pick back up once the reaction's done. So this is what the reaction looks like if you forget about it overnight and then let it sit for quite a while. So the reaction does take some time to actually complete, and this is what it looks like when it's fully completed. And so now I'm going to go ahead and remove my nails and separate out my copper. So I'm going to swirl that to get the all the copper loose. And then I need just the nails. Okay, there's one. And then there's the second one. So I'm going to go ahead and put those in Beaker 2. So let's label Beaker 2. Okay, and then I'm going to put my nails in there, and we're going to set them aside and let them dry. Okay, now I need to decant my liquid away from my copper, which decanting is really just a fancy way to say pouring carefully. So we are going to carefully pour the remaining solution away, and the goal is to leave just the copper in the bottom of this beaker. So I'm going to grab another beaker. Okay, so now I have copper left, my solution's in here. I'm going to rinse this with some distilled water and decant again. And I'll do that again. I'm going to let it settle a little bit so all the copper sinks to the bottom. Now I'm losing a little bit of my copper. That's going to happen just because it's in such small little pieces. Some of it's going to get caught in the liquid when you decant. And I'm going to decant rinse and decant one more time. Okay, so now I have fairly clean copper that I'm going to set aside and let it dry. That way we can come back and mass both our nails and our copper once they've dried, and then we can wrap up the calculations for this lab. So now that our nails and our copper have sat and air dried, we can continue on with part 2 of the procedure. So step 16 says remove dry nails from Beaker 2, mass dry nails, and record in data table. So I'm going to remove my nails. And so this would be the mass of the nails after, and the mass of the nails after is 4.20 grams. So the mass of the nails after is 4.20 grams. Okay, step 17 is to rinse the beaker. I'm going to wash that here when we're done. You don't need to watch me wash a beaker. Step 18 says mass beaker 1 with dried product. So here's beaker 1, Here's what the product looks like. So it's there in the bottom of the beaker. So we're gonna mass that. And so the mass of beaker 1 with the copper is 115.66 grams. So it's 115.66 grams. And then 19 is place dried product in product container and clean beaker 1. So I will wrap that up now that we're finished with the video. So in your hypothesis, you hypothesize two things. You hypothesize the number of moles of copper that you would produce, and you hypothesize the ratio between the iron and the copper. So now that you've done the calculations, hopefully you've done those already if you're watching this part of the video. Now that you've done the calculations, you have your moles of copper produced in your ratio. The accepted ratio for this reaction is a 1-to-1 ratio between iron and copper. And that's because when we look at the balanced chemical reaction equation, we see that for every 1 copper, we need 1 iron. Or for every 1 iron we use, we produce 1 copper. For the accepted value for the amount of copper that we're going to produce, you should have produced about 0.02 moles of copper. It's going to vary a little bit for each group depending on exactly how much copper 2 chloride you used and how long you let your reaction go. But you should have ended up with about 0.02 moles of copper. So those are your accepted results, and you should now be able to write your lab summary.